Hey, can you find a water bottle for me?
Something so simple.
Good afternoon. I'm Max Brantley with the Arkansas Times on Thursday, November 30th. Well, some interesting news broke this morning in the New York Times. The New York Times reported that Donald Trump's about had enough of Rex Tillerson as Secretary of State. He has a plan afoot, they say, to replace Tillerson with Mike Pompeo, the director of the CIA, and if that happens, then our own Tom Cotton, the U.S. Senator from Arkansas, would be named to head the CIA. This would be an interesting development, among other things. In addition to being a down-the-line Trump supporter, Cotton has been skeptical about reports of Russian involvement in the election, something the CIA believes is absolutely true. He's also been a fan of waterboarding, something the CIA has moved away from, I'm happy to say. If Tom Cotton were to be appointed to that role, the governor would appoint somebody to serve until an election. That could be in 2018, depending on when the appointment happened, maybe not until 2020 when Cotton's term ends. Cotton going to a CIA job has pros and cons in both directions, depending on how you view things. He'd no longer be a U.S. Senator from Arkansas, and decide for yourself whether that's a pro or a con. Speaking of Tom Cotton, you do know that among other things, he's a big supporter of the Senate Republican tax cutting bill. Interesting analysis of that in the New York Times today, full of the bad side of this bill and the unintended consequences, and particularly shifting burdens to the state that they won't be able to pay for a variety of reasons, including medical costs. Well, one interesting fact I think it's worth remembering when Tom Cotton says this bill is good for everybody, the analysis shows that in 2027, people making $40,000 to $50,000 a year will have a cumulative $5 billion tax increase. People making more than $1 million a year will have a $5 billion tax cut. Makes sense. It does to Tom Cotton, our perhaps future CIA director. Today, the Arkansas Public Service Commission is having a hearing on whether it's going to make it less advantageous for people to generate power for their homes with solar power. The electric utilities want to charge those people more. People who believe in clean energy on the other side. Check our arkansasblog.com later today for a report on this from Benji Hardy, who's covering the hearing. We learned yesterday afternoon, after we did this program, that the Highway Department is making the concrete Gulch project it's proposing through downtown Little Rock even worse than we thought. They now have eliminated an idea of having an 8-lane freeway. They won't have a 10-lane freeway through downtown. 6 freeway lanes and 4 lanes, they call them collector lanes. The freeway lanes would be below ground level, making this even more of a wider concrete Gulch. Most city officials seem ready to roll over for whatever the Highway Department wants. There are some people that have better ideas on planning this roadway. They will be heard, and it's likely that a lawsuit will be filed before this project moves forward. Earlier this week, UAMS, the giant medical school campus in Little Rock that also has branches all over the state, met with staff to talk about budget problems. They learned there that what was already acknowledged as a $39 million deficit this budget year that's being paid out of reserves, that the budget's actually running $72 million behind, and they've got to cover that $33 million in the 6 months remaining this fiscal year, not to mention figuring out how to cover a $72 million loss in the next year, which begins July the 1st. The acting chancellor of the campus says they're going to take efficiencies into account, hope for more revenue, but people are concerned that ultimately the only way to fix this situation is by job cuts, and terminations certainly are among the list of things the chancellor said might be possible at that. She says it's only a 2% budget cut, but only 2% at a 10,000 employee institution may mean a couple of hundred people, so that may seem small to her, but not so much to those who might be affected. Also today we learned that a Dallas real estate broker is advertising the Marriott Hotel in downtown Little Rock for sale. The Memphis owners perhaps are just seeing if there's a good opportunity to score a profit on their 2012 acquisition of that building, formerly the Peabody Hotel. Don't know yet. They haven't been reachable for comment, but city convention officials who have a cooperative agreement with the hotel because the convention facilities see this as just normal business doesn't necessarily reflect any problem in the operation of the hotel. The Arkansas Supreme Court today awarded court costs to Mike Wilson and John Ogles, the lawyers who struck down the unconstitutional passing out of state surplus money as directed by legislators to regional planning and development districts. A couple of justices on the Supreme Court, Rhonda Wood and Sean Womack, for reasons unclear to me, didn't think the state should have to pay in losing an illegal exaction suit that we owe Mike Wilson a great debt for doing for basically free attorney's fees. The Arkansas Blog today developed some information on a story that broke last week. Judge Tim Fox issued an order last Thursday that directed that $2.2 million remaining in a $45 million settlement fund paid by a tobacco company over the damages done by Marlboro Light cigarettes should go to be split between the two law schools in Arkansas for a scholarship fund that encourages students who want to get into public interest law. Judge Fox thinks that public interest law and tort litigation is a good thing and that we ought to encourage more of it. He chose that. He chose this over a number of people who recommended spending the money on causes directly related to cancer, the Cancer Society, cancer research, and that sort of thing. A reader called into attention this decision by the judge, thinks if he wasn't going to take their ideas for spending this money into account, why did he ask in the first place? But the judge laid out some reasons and paid tribute to some public interest lawyers at the two law schools in the course of making that ruling, which you can find the details at arkansasblog.com. And finally, there's a lot of talk about fake news, real news, the sad state of the newspaper business. A hat tip today, the Forrest City Times-Herald. Again, you can go to the Arkansas blog and get a full account of that community newspaper's reporting on a very controversial school superintendent who's had a checkered past that's involved allegations on test score cheating and then some financial irregularities. Currently, there's a big controversy in Forrest City. Some teachers, 20 of them were recruited from the Philippines. They've been housed 4 or 5 to a house in very poor housing in Madison, Arkansas, at what the newspaper seems to indicate are exorbitant rates. Interesting reporting. It's what you need newspapers for, is to keep an eye on autocratic public officials, school district or otherwise. So give a look at the Forrest City Times-Herald, particularly if you live over there. It's important. I'm Max Brantley. I'm resisting. I'll be back tomorrow.